Mr. Mayor, at 6 o'clock, would you like to call the work session to order?
Okay, 6 o'clock. Let's call this work session of the North Kansas City City Council, August 18th, 2020. Go for it, Eric.
Thanks, sir. At your last meeting on August 4th, City Council scheduled a work session on the topic of, well, a couple of topics really. One being forming a committee for the purpose of reviewing city codes. That was suggested by Councilmember Safer, and Councilmember Toll wished to speak about designing some kind of city equity inclusion effort. So we've put both of those items on the agenda for tonight. We don't have any staff report for you, so we would throw it open at this point for any discussion that you might wish to have. Councilmember Toll.
Don't let me speak for you, Tony. I would just speak to the part that I added, which is to say that I've had members of the community approach me that are interested in creating such, don't know what you want to call it, a committee, a board, not sure what word to put in there, that would include people from all 4 wards to kind of comment on and bring issues to the city about issues that involve equity and inclusion. And I was thinking when Tony spoke up that we could take his idea and make it broader. So it's not just coming back on ordinances, which I know we have a plan for, but in all areas. And the reason why I think this might be important is because even though we're open to public comments at the beginning of every meeting, that's not a dialogue. We're not doing a back and forth with the citizens. And I feel like we could get some really valuable input and perspectives this way.
Mayor Stilo and then Councilmember Safer.
Yeah. Amy, could you explain to me just exactly what this inclusion and all, what do you mean?
Did you mean Councilmember Toll, Mayor? You said Amy.
Yeah, Toll.
Yeah.
Toll.
What I mean is we could talk about what it would actually be made of, but the thought is that there would be 2 people from each ward to bring in a diverse group. So looking around at the group we have here, it doesn't represent the diversity that we see in our community, and that we could represent different perspectives. We know that the citizens were the ones that brought up some ordinance changes to us, which I think probably spurred Tony's comments, but there are other things as well that they could spearhead, comment, bring issues to us with, and it's something they're interested in doing. So I think it would be a valuable perspective for us to take into account. And I don't think it will be something that we have to manage. As far as I don't think it will be more work. We could appoint 1 person to the committee that's a non-voting member that could be the liaison.
Councilmember Safer.
I sent an email to the members. You may not have all gotten it about what I'm calling a codes review commission. So I'll just quickly read it. It won't take long. City staff has proposed a technical review. It could discover possible duplication, inconsistencies, conflicts, etc., within the codes. But such a review would have missed the 9.12 defensive force that we did repeal, and the 9.36 housing discrimination, which we amended. My proposal is a social, political, and cultural review. Those repeals and amendments that we did were singular, not the result of an actual review of city codes. There are likely other codes that are in need of repeal or updating with amendments. Size of the undertaking is more than the council itself can reasonably undertake. Since this is a social, political, and cultural review, I believe that residents, with possible city staff help, are best able to carry out this review and make recommendations to the council. Due to the size of the task, I have proposed 8 members, 2 from each council ward. Since the council members know their own wards best, I suggest that each council member recommend 2 members to be appointed by the mayor to the Codes Review Commission. To make the work more manageable, I suggest that we begin with a follow-up to those 2 codes we either recently repealed or amended, with an initial focus on public safety and rental properties, and landlord inspection, etc. codes. I welcome discussion.
May I ask one question just before you all have that discussion? Councilmember Saper, when you sent that email out to council members, did we do ask that you include the city clerk? Because
that was my fault.
That's very important for open meetings reasons. She's the custodian of records. If you would, if you don't mind, sir, if you send an email out, could you please just type in governing body? That will ensure that the city clerk gets it. The assistant city administrator and I are also on that tab, and that way we can also provide follow-up. But very important for that reason that you do include the custodian of records.
I apologize for that.
Thank you, sir.
We'll do so in the future.
Yeah, Councilmember DeLong.
Yeah, so I want to thank Tony for sharing that. As I've had discussions about a diversity and inclusion board, I think a lot of what he's talking about could be included in a group that isn't just a task force or temporary in nature, but more of a permanent group. And I think that'd be the diversity and inclusion board. And I think we could start them off as a goal of doing kind of what you're talking about. So yeah. I definitely think a council or diversity, I don't know what exactly you call it, diversity inclusion board council, I think would definitely include stuff like city council feedback and stuff like community engagement. And I think that could be included in that. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm rolling over what you're saying, but I definitely think we could combine that into the goals of a more perpetual group, I guess.
I agree.
That's all I have for the moment. I'll see what everyone else has to say.
Sorry.
Member Tull, and then Councilmember Clevenger, and then Mayor Stilo.
I was just going to say, I didn't receive your email, Tony. I went back and double checked, just so you know. It didn't go out to everybody.
Sorry.
Councilmember Clevenger.
A couple of questions on this is, as far as I like the idea of the committee and a broad committee that will look not only at the codes, but at other issues facing our city or other policies. Couple of questions then is, I don't know how we would set this up, or if we'd set it up during COVID, or if this would be something we would start at the next calendar year. And then as far as maybe a council member appointing or recommending 1 or 2 people, depending on how big the board is. Also got to look at just housekeeping items like how long these people would serve. And if you're going to write it in as, as an established board for the city in the ordinance. So those are a couple of questions that I had, was like board members, how often would they serve? How long would they serve? And that was the main question.
Mayor Stilo.
Well, am I correct in saying we've hired a professional group to take a look at these codes and things like that? Is that true?
Yes, sir. The concern that's been expressed is that the code review company that would do the review of the codes would be doing something different than what I think is being discussed by the council tonight. It would be a technical review than as Councilmember Saper says, a social, political, and cultural review.
Well, don't you think it'd be a good idea to go ahead and wait till these people get done with their review before we take on anything else?
Councilmember Tull.
That would make sense if we were only looking at the ordinances, but if we're proposing, as I'm proposing, a committee that would be able to give us feedback in a variety of areas, then I don't think we would need to wait for that code review, because it would be a broader committee. And I think it would be a good step for the city to say that we value and we support diversity in our city, and we know that their feedback is valuable to how we're going to move forward.
Councilmember Saper and then Mayor Stilo.
I see absolutely no reason why they can't both be done simultaneously. Again, the one is a technical review and the other is a social, political, cultural review. And with the inclusion part of it, they can fit together quite well.
Mayor Stilo and then Councilmember Farr.
My question is this: if we get this group together, are we still going to be the virtual meetings, or are we going to have face-to-face meetings? I can see this thing going into a big can of worms.
Councilmember Farr.
And to back up on Don's, where is it going to be held at? How is it going to be run? What member of staff is going to be in charge of it? Who the secretary is going to be of this? Do we have enough personnel to do all this? Because now we're talking an hour, 2 hours each meeting. Who knows? I mean, we've got a long ways to go before we figure out what's going on.
Councilmember Tall.
It's obviously all still up for debate, but I think it would honestly take very minimal resources from our end. This is something that people have been asking to do, that they're interested and they want to see at the table. If we had one member on as a non-voting member, I would volunteer to do that, so you wouldn't have to worry about spending the extra time. I know when people had brought the idea to me, we just met at Iron District at a safe distance, meeting outside. They would really be a part of developing this committee. They would be the driving force. So it wouldn't be the city council making requests of them. They would be the driving force behind this committee and would just have an avenue to give feedback to the council and to the mayor.
Councilmember DeLong.
And I guess I guess I don't quite understand what the concern would be on a virtual meeting. I mean, it's kind of become the normal for most everybody, and it's what we've been doing. So, but I mean, I would think, depending on how quick it got started up and depending on the condition of COVID, of course, there's a good possibility that this could start virtually, I would think. And certainly other similar boards are meeting the same way all across the country. I mean, we're not the first ones to come up with the diversity and inclusion board. It seems to be a more common, more frequent thing popping up everywhere. So, I mean, I think meeting structure, they would have to come up with that at some point. I think at first we have to come to consensus whether or not we would want to proceed with, if we like the general concept and if we want to do it before we start making individual rules about it.
One quick comment, and then I'll call on Councilmember Smith. There is a certain staff burden involved with virtual meetings. There we do have to have a staff member that is hosting and running the meeting. So the virtual meetings actually do create a little bit more of a staff burden than an in-person meeting with a council liaison such as what Councilmember Tall mentioned. Councilmember Smith.
Eric, on what you just said, does this have to run officially through city channels, or could we just name a couple people from each ward, as each council person in their wards can get together and pick a couple people? They meet via a Zoom call that, say, Lisa could set up and toss around some ideas. Obviously, they're going to have to take some time to read through the code. I've done it myself. It's not a fun read. And it takes a little while to get through. So they're going to have to comb through it and come back with some things to talk about. It just seems like it'd be very simple. It takes 10 minutes to set up a Zoom meeting. If it doesn't have to go through the official channels to be an open meeting or whatever, this seems like it could just be Lisa sets it up. They all get together and talk about what the goal is, go out, read the code, come back with notes, meet again, present something to us if there is something to present. If not, we move along. It just doesn't seem like it's going to have to be very burdensome. And I love the idea of getting it done.
I guess to answer your question, I'll call on Councilmember DeLong and then Mayor Stilo. It sort of depends upon how official you make this committee. If you appoint people, they're named. If it becomes an official city meeting, then we need to notice it up and hold it in an open fashion. If, on the other hand, it's done more informally, maybe not with named people, but more of an informal conversational effort, then there might be a way to do that. That wouldn't involve us having to do it as an official city meeting, if you understand. I think it was Councilmember DeLong and the Mayor Stilo.
Yeah, to Jesse's point, I think though, the scope of what's been brought to me goes beyond just reviewing the codes. I mean, this is looking at policy now that we currently have and also recommending policy into the future. So the goal is, as we have future items, they are also able to review future items as well as maybe propose items or come up with items out of this group, as well as another pillar that they were talking to me about with community engagement. Engaging the community to solicit feedback, also probably hosting events around diversity and inclusion. Just bringing more awareness to issues is more what it seems like the goal was here, more than beyond just the code review. So I just wanted to add, I do think there's more to it than just the code review.
Mayor Stilo?
Apparently you guys live in a different part of town than I do. I have not heard anything about anybody too worried about the conclusion and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you want to do this on an informal basis and then don't get the city involved, I'll go along with that. But I'm not real happy with the idea of trying to do this through the city.
Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I think we do live in a different part of town than you do. And I have heard these kind of issues. I don't know if it's that I'm just hearing more from my neighbors or I'm out walking around talking to people, but it is a thing, just highlighted by the two parts of the code that were brought up and were changed recently. So if people are bringing these things up, they do need a voice rather than just, writing an email to Eric and having him read it on here. They bring it to us sometimes, but it can get clouded up. It would be good to have a unified effort on this. If we need the city involved because it's a larger piece than just the code, then we make that happen. But it's something that's valuable. It's done elsewhere, and this isn't some crazy idea out of left field. This is something that's very useful. And I'm glad that Tony brought it to us. Tony, one other thing for you. If you could send that email back, I guess, out to the governing body, like Eric asked, I didn't get it. It may have gone to Officer Jason Smith, which he gets a lot of my email. So very good chance of that.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart, and then Councilmember Clark.
It seems like, the majority wants this, so there's no good way to stop it. But if you're talking about changing the ordinances, which is a law, it's city laws and policy, to me, that has to be a public meeting. And if they do it virtually like we do here, then, employees going to have to do it. I don't think you could do this privately. I really don't. I think it ought to be run by Tom. Checked out with Tom on the legalities of it. But if you're changing laws or even the policy of the government of the city, then I think it has to be a city function and a public meeting.
May I ask, and I've got Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember Smith. Mr. Barzee, are you on the meeting? And if so, do you have a comment?
No, I'm not on the meeting this evening. Yes, I'm, the way it's being discussed here publicly. I understood where you were going with it, Eric, but I don't see how you do what Mr. Saper, I heard him say, would like to be done if you don't have city involvement in it. And therefore, you would need to follow all of the open meetings and open records rules and requirements, et cetera. And then, recommendations could be made, but do understand that that's all that they would ever be, because it would require, amending ordinances, and everything in the code book was done by ordinance, not by resolution. So that would always require 5 affirmative votes. And of course, in the third-class city of the mayor form of government, mayor council form of government that we have, the mayor does have, it's not done too often in our city, but it has been done. The mayor has the right to veto. which then would require an override of veto one. And I'm not saying he hasn't said anything. This is just Tom Barzee telling you what the rules would be. But remember, anything that would come to you, it's really no different than comments from the public. You might add greater weight to it because people have, put a lot of effort into it, and I'm sure they would. But nevertheless, changes can only be made through you folks.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I think my understanding was that this group would sort of help kind of condense maybe a long list of potential emails or comments or things like that, but kind of group together everyone's thoughts into like a more condensed area so that they can then present to say, here's what we feel like, here are the results of our findings. Maybe I'm not understanding that, but that's what it seemed more like, that they weren't really going to come to task to say, we're redlining all these things ourselves and we're going to do it without anybody knowing. I think it's just a matter of kind of being like our eyes on the road and just being very aware of our neighbors and the concerns that are out there that maybe we're not able to immediately touch because there's all these other things that we're voting through. And I think it's maybe just more a matter of having some voices. I am in Fourth Ward, obviously, and I do have neighbors that don't necessarily propose it in the way of I want more inclusion, but they do have needs that they want addressed. And I think it would be nice to have them sort of summarized in a way. Or, like, what are you guys doing for new parents or, different areas that we may not be aware of, especially in a community where there may be a lot of retirees that are like, oh, the way the old way was is the way it should be. But there are a lot of new faces moving in and we want to be accommodating to any of those individuals. So I think it's more circulated around that. And then but again, I'm listening to Tom Barzee and saying like, if they start redlining and things like that, but I think it's more the presentation of an idea or some flaws that they've recognized that they would like to be addressed that I think would first be fielded by Lisa and then maybe then push to say, let's bring it to the attention of the city council. Maybe I'm wrong. That's it.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, that it would be an intentional way of bringing together these individuals who have reached out before. Now we're saying we're intentional about this. We want to hear from you. And we're going to bring a group of you together who have shown interest in this, who are devoted to this idea, rather than just hoping that people approach us on the street or however they might get a hold of us. Now we're saying, like, we're going to set this up. We want to hear from you. But to be clear, and to Rick's point, they wouldn't be changing the policy. They wouldn't be making sweeping changes to the code. They would be making recommendations to us to then yay or nay, or just at least to discuss it. So that's where Eric and Tom, my question becomes, does that have to run through the city through open meetings if it's just citizens making recommendations to council, as they would anyway, but in a more intentional manner? So I guess that's my question to you.
Well, the way I look, if I could, Eric.
Yeah, please do, Tom.
Sure. The way I understand, I think what you're saying, but I think until I would see how it's to operate better, it's kind of hard for me to come to some final conclusion. And the reason I say that is, see, all of this discussion that you're having, right now is great, but it tends to make me think that this is going to be something organized by, quote, the city council. If what you're saying is, in our own wards, we're just going to mention, maybe you ought to get together and then let them talk about things and do it very, very informally, and come to you with recommendations. That's something else. But see, that wasn't what I heard, what Mr. Saper originally went over at the beginning. It was, each would appoint two, and then you'd have for a committee ultimately of, the way I understood it, of 8, but each would appoint or recommend to the mayor, and then the mayor would pick from that group is what I understood. And Mr. Saper, he's articulate. He'll let me know if I'm not right. That sounds to me awful like then a committee of the city, and the rules are very clear about that in the law. If it's a committee, then or a board of some kind, then in fact the Sunshine Law applies, and all of the things that go with it apply. Okay, and so it really depends on how it gets ultimately put together. You know, what you folks do on your own to get something going out there, as long as it's not the group of you deciding how to do it, I don't think that's a problem. And you can have a group of people come together and decide they want to discuss things, maybe recommendations they want to make to you folks or even to the mayor. I'm not trying to be evasive, but until I see how it's really structured, it's hard to me to say it either is governed by all the rules and regulations, et cetera, of the city or not. And that becomes important for other things as well, believe it or not. You know, volunteers are covered by, that are formally with the boards and commissions, committees, whatever, are covered by the city's insurance. And I'm not saying this is going to be a very, you know, liability sensitive organization, but that doesn't mean something couldn't happen. So there's just a lot of things that, you know, that I would want to sit down and really look at. But what you're talking about is certainly doable. It just, how much involvement does the city end up having is the way I'm looking at it. Okay, and then the more involvement, the more it becomes clearly a city function, which means our rules and regulations, the state law has to apply. Okay.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, as far as I agree with Councilmember Stewart on this. I want the diversity inclusion. I think it's an important aspect of what we're going to bring forward. I appreciate the council members that brought it forward, but I do think it should be more formal. I think if the city's going to be involved, that it should be in open meetings. That way, like I've said before, for our board meetings and other city meetings that can be televised. You know, this is another one that can maybe, you know, whether they're meeting in person or how they're going to do it virtually in the beginning. But if we're naming people, we need to, you know, I believe it needs to be more formal than more informal, is my opinion.
Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, I agree that it should be very formal and organized, as our city attorney has outlined. It may be difficult, but it's doable. It's something that we need to do and should do. And if we make it informal, there's a very high risk that it'll dissipate and get sloughed off. A formal organization will give it a life to continue and keep reviewing not only what we have now, but what happens in the future. That's my comment.
Councilmember Stewart, and then Councilmember DeLong.
Yeah, it's just a minor thing. When Tony read us that email, I didn't get it either, but
sorry.
But you read it to me now. That's all I need. But in the end, I know what you meant, but you said each council person would be 2 members nominated. You meant 2 per ward. I'm
correct.
Sure. Okay, I didn't want 16 people board.
No.
Okay, that's all I got.
Member DeLong.
I feel like we still have a couple competing thoughts, though. Well, some still talking about more of a review of just codes, and a few of us talking about an overall board that has a little bit broader of a objective, I guess. So I guess what would be our next step really to creating a new board or kind of deciding what direction we want to go? And I don't know if that's for staff. I mean, how would you?
Yeah, the way it would, I think it would take somebody writing up a proposal and putting it on a formal council agenda for some kind of vote, debate and vote. Right now, Councilmember Clevenger asked a lot of good questions about, what would the term be, and, the questions like that. I think all those kinds of things need to be laid out and the council needs to decide on the scope too, because it still does seem to me that you haven't entirely decided on what the scope of this group would be. But I think it needs to be laid out probably in writing so that everybody has a good understanding of it and can vote up or down on some kind of proposal at some point in an open meeting. Councilmember DeLong.
Okay, so then I guess what I'd ask next of council is if there's any other questions, comments, or concerns now that we kind of get out of the way, so then we could actually work on a formal proposal of some sort. Because I know from, in terms of what, and then I can't remember Councilmember Clevenger's questions exactly. I wrote them down, then I flipped my paper over. Anyways, but
Like
yeah,
the term.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just like the term and like how long they're going to serve, and then the original goals of the organization, you know, not just
Okay.
codes, but other issues as well that we want to look at.
Okay, yeah, and then that's, okay, perfect, that'll help, because definitely as I've had discussions, I mean, terms, what has been said, I feel like, is people do like individual council members selecting somebody, feeling like they'd get a broader depth of people. You know, we all kind of, we run in separate circles, we're around different people, so if we're all recommending one person, then you probably have a pretty good chance of having a more diverse group of people at least. And like you said, on terms, I guess that'd be kind of up for whatever we feel would probably be appropriate to still stick with our normal, either 2 or 3 year term, but that would be up for discussion. That's all I have for the moment.
Mayor Stila.
Has anybody thought about, you know, we've got a lot of businesses here in Northtown, and none of them have any say on how this city is run. Would it be advisable in this group, if they finally put it together, to invite business people to get involved in this?
Councilmember DeLong.
So initially, that was actually something, as I talked to an individual that I recommended as well, I thought it would be good. I think initially we formed the board of residents and then kind of let the group dictate and drive that. But my recommendation would be, yeah, I do think there is some places you can bridge businesses into this, bring businesses in. You could possibly bring youth in. You could possibly bring high school people in. I mean, you could bridge some of these different areas and really become a group that touches all aspects of town, really. So I do think so. I don't know if we necessarily formally propose that and force that into the group, or we recommend that. Say we set 9 residents, so each of us gets essentially a pick, plus a mayor gets an at-large pick, and then let them kind of decide if they want additional members to sit on their board when they create their bylaws and create kind of their initial objectives.
Mayor Stila.
Yeah, you know, apparently I put my cell phone number on our website, and I get people calling me quite often. And sometimes I get involved and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I've been kind of criticized because I've got involved. But I don't see why people can't come to their councilman and get things straightened out. I can't really understand why we have to involve that many more people in trying to run this city.
Councilmember Tall.
I would just sort of repeat what Jesse had said, which I thought was a really good comment about having a unified voice. So we have had several people coming with similar requests, and if they had a committee where they could hash it out together first and have a unified voice coming to the city council, I think that would be valuable.
Councilmember Saper.
What we've got now is people coming to all of us and talking with their issues. And those of us, we bring them to whoever we can help. But it's done on a piecemeal fashion. This would be a more thorough, organized, unified kind of approach that would encourage more inclusion. And that's why I'm advocating it.
Councilmember Tall.
Okay, last comment. I'm just going to repeat what I think are things that need to be hashed out before a proposal is written. I want to make sure I got everybody's concerns. So how members are chosen, how long is the term, the scope of the committee, is there an age limit, and recommendations for business involvement. Is there anything else that anyone would like me? Yes.
Well, you could drop age limit. I mean, that's almost be illegal, I think.
Well, I meant youth, because someone had said maybe we could get the youth group from the high school. Sorry, I probably should have specified. When someone said maybe we could bring in a youth group from the high school, I just thought maybe we would leave it open-ended instead of having age limits.
But maybe the word limit is what is hanging me up. I mean, whether it be the high limit or low limit, I don't care. You can have all teenagers doing it if you want to. But don't say it's a limit. You say it's a limit, you're excluding somebody. So,
okay, so
just say
open
you want
to everyone of all ages.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Thank you for saying that, because I'm sure everyone else heard it the right way, because no one else is in my brain. But I was thinking about high school students, and I'll write that differently.
Councilmember DeLong.
I would just add to that, obviously, scope is an important part of this. So that definitely needs to be hashed out on what their objectives are. Are we creating anything right off the bat? Are we saying within 1 year, create some sort of strategic plan? You know, I can reach out to you about some other stuff I got on here too, but scope, we definitely.
Yeah, go ahead. Scope and timeline.
And if we have any initial goals or initial objectives that, you know, they're hitting the gate running with some of these initial objectives. That's all I got for the moment.
Tony, you have something to add?
Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, I would just like to initially look at the kinds of issues we actually dealt with in piecemeal fashion with those two ordinances recently. One terminating one of them and the other amending one, and focus on those areas. Again, public safety, which is crucial. And another issue, since about 3/4 of the population in North Kansas City is in rental housing, that we focus on that as well. As a start, we have to start somewhere.
Thank you. And thank you for clearing that up, Mr. Stewart. I would have hated that to go out to everybody with not what I intended at all. So thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, just one other thing. I do believe this is going to take a while. When you bring back, at least it's going to set it up, what program, whatever we called it, but it'll have to come back to a work session. I don't just want to say the next time we face this, it's a voting night. You know, we're going to have to go over these maybe several times, who knows, to get it right. And I'm sure that's probably what's planned. It wasn't going to, our next regular meeting, or not tonight, but next month, the very next one, a regular council meeting, have this to vote on. You know, I don't think we should do that.
Councilmember Smith.
What is the appropriate way to workshop this? I mean, it sounds like Lisa's going to kind of spearhead writing it up, and then if she brings it back to a work session and we disagree with some of the terms, or we want to work those around, and she brings another draft and we still want to massage those, at what point is it going to be a thing we can bring to a council meeting and vote on? Because I don't want to see it drag out forever, but we do want to get it right in the initial proposal. So would it be, Eric, would it be Lisa writes it up, brings it to the work session, or sends it to us in an email to review so we can be ready to discuss it without, running afoul of an open meetings kind of thing? How would that look?
So I'd suggest that Councilmember Polk could send it to me, to staff. We would then send it out to you for another work session. I think Councilmember Stewart probably has that right. And I would say that at the point when it appears you have some consensus based upon a work session discussion, then it's ready to put on to a council agenda for a vote to establish such a committee or task force or whatever it is. Then at that point, we put it on your formal agenda. Does that make sense? Okay. Is there any, Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I kind of like to say, this is a public meeting, isn't it? Isn't a public in on this? It's everybody take notice. If you want to be on this committee, if it's formed, or you know somebody, the last meeting we had, the next day, Zach and I got an email from seemed like a nice young lady that really wants to be on this. So, but that's one person. You know, if people are listening to this tonight, you got an interest in it, let your council person know. So we don't start this and then have trouble filling it. And then people say, well, I wish I knew about that. So pass it around to your neighbors. If you're not interested, if you know a neighbor or something, and have them email each one of us or call us, whatever you want to do. That's all.
Certainly, once council has established the commission and the scope of it and et cetera, then staff would do its part to let people know about the possibility of applying to be on that board. Is there any more discussion? So if I understand correctly, Councilmember Tull, you're going to take the lead at this point, to work up something, send it to staff, and then we will disseminate it for another work session. Is that?
Yes, I will work on it and I'll get it to you. And also to piggyback off of Mr. Stewart, if you've been listening and you have input as well or things that you want clarified, please go ahead and email me because I'll be working on it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You want to call a roll?
Sure. I'm not sure if City Clerk, are you on the call?
I am.
Would you like to call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yep.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong.
Yes.